Although this EU trade framework is light on the details, as we've discussed in the last hour, and heavy on the caveats, it's still a pretty big deal, especially knowing how rocky these talks have been throughout. And yet Donald Trump can't seem to shake the Epstein questions. We're seeing him visibly frustrated with reporters as they ask questions about this. But how much is this also starting to percolate and envelop the administration behind the scenes?
Well, that's exactly his frustration. You saw he's on a trip abroad. There used to be, this is sort of stopped in the first Trump era, this idea that domestic politics and controversy stopped at the water's edge. But he's unveiling this trade deal, and he was asked by a reporter, hey, is the reason you wanted this trade deal essentially to distract from the Jeffrey Epstein controversy back home? That, of course, is understandably frustrating to him. But in my reporting, this has been going on, this frustration, for several weeks now, really since early July, when the Justice Department released that first memo that brought this all back to the forefront. And the president's view and the view of his team was that he wanted to move on. He had conveyed to his base that he wanted to move on, and that should have sufficed in his view. So initially, they didn't want to take any extra steps. They were angry and frustrated that they couldn't showcase what they viewed were his wins from trying to sell the, what he would call the big, beautiful bill, to now on trade. He wanted them to move on. Now, as more shoes have dropped, for instance, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Trump allegedly, according to them, sent Jeffrey Epstein a bawdy 50th birthday card, and more reporting like that. They have been forced to take more steps and try to respond in a way they hadn't wanted to. But that is the original inception. He feels his word should suffice with his base, and this is one of the rare areas where it hasn't.
And we can't forget the Wall Street Journal reporting also that the president was informed by Pam Bondi and others that he appeared in the Epstein files. Charlie, you wrote recently about what you call Donald Trump's desperate attempts to control the narrative by means of distraction. Why are all of these tactics that he has thrown out there, all the spaghetti sticking to the wall, why is none of it really working, including with a lot of the most fervent people in his base?
Well, I think it's just an example of how dangerous it is to play with these types of conspiracy theories and to create this spectacle around the idea of finally delivering transparency and bringing this quote unquote pedophile ring to justice. It has created this understanding that there's going to be some broad reveal, and now Donald Trump is sort of framed in this way as the person obstructing all of that. I think, though, that if you look around in right-wing media now, you start to see the ways that they're, floating these different trial balloons. I think with some of the folks there is this understanding that they can try to position this as moving on, right? You're seeing people start in right-wing media. Greg Kelly on Newsmax was talking about Ghislaine Maxwell as, maybe just an innocent bystander in all this, maybe actually a victim of some of this, right? And sort of setting the stage for, potential ideas of the Trump administration, working more closely with her. So I think what they're trying to do is build a pathway out of this, but it doesn't seem like any of that is going to stick, because obviously working with Maxwell is just the Trump administration sort of working with these people who have been framed as part of this, elite pedophile cabal. And it's not playing well with the base.
So, Mark, I want to get into the Washington Post reporting on how this whole ordeal has eclipsed Trump's agenda and has really, frankly, shaken his administration. Quote, "This is a pretty substantial distraction," said one person close to the situation. "While many are trying to keep the unity, in many ways, the DOJ and the FBI are breaking at the seams. Many are wondering how sustainable this is going to be for all of the parties involved, be it the FBI director, the attorney general." So I think the big question here is there going to be blame thrown around, and could we see the axe come down swinging?
Well, there already is. I mean, Charlie put it well. He said that there was supposed to be the big reveal. The whole Epstein narrative has been fed and fueled by the MAGA base from the very beginning, and including those in power like Kash Patel and Don Bongino. I mean, these are guys who are talking about the Epstein files years ago and saying that no one would ever be happy until they saw the actual files. Pam Bondi said she had the files. She said she was going to release the files. So listen, I've been a communications director for a number of office holders, including presidents. I can just tell you, this ain't going away. Those dogs are going to hunt a long time, and they're going to keep barking until they get the
A bite.
Until they bite.
Okay, so
yeah.
to that end, Ashley, Pam Bondi has obviously been at the center of all of this. She went on Fox News not so long ago saying she was reviewing what she seemed to be referring to as the files there. Is she the most likely target if the president starts to fire people? Because as of now, it seems like the Trump administration wants to avoid a spectacle and hasn't come down on its own.
Right. They don't want to give the media or sort of the firing squad a scalp. I've talked to people in the administration who have said, look, we've been through this before. You guys think it's this existential epic controversy, but it's not. It's no different, than when some of the base was upset when we bombed Iran. I would argue it does feel substantially different. But what's interesting is when I was talking to people in the White House, and again, this was about what I'm about to say is from about a week ago. And the caveat is everything in Trump's orbit can change incredibly quickly. But at the time when I asked this very question, I was told that the president is very supportive of Pam Bondi, and he is supportive of Kash Patel and Bongino. And part of that frustration at the time was this idea that Bongino and Patel had let this spill into public view. Remember, we had Bongino sort of publicly hand-wringing, or at least to allies who were leaking it to the media. Was he going to resign? Was he going to stay? Was the Trump administration MAGA enough? They had to dispatch J.D. Vance behind the scenes to try to help make peace. And so that spilling out in the public view in that moment was the biggest sin for President Trump. Although there are a number of people, including close allies of the president, who blame Pam Bondi for this, going back to that original moment when she said the files are sitting here on my desk, and then when she exacerbated it by calling MAGA influences to the White House to give them what she said was sort of special classified information and giving them basically nothing new in a way that prompted that real backlash.
They were not happy with what they got. That was supposedly only phase one. We'll see if there is a phase two here. Republicans, the leadership, have tried to, first of all, House Speaker Mike Johnson adjourning the House, trying to get away from some of this emergency dispatch in order to try to vote on getting some of these files released. So, Max, let's listen to what he had to say, and then I want your reaction to how this is shaking up the MAGA base and the Republican Party.
House Republicans insist upon the release of all credible evidence and information related to Epstein in any way. But we are also insisting upon the protection of innocent victims. And our concern is that the Massey and Khanna discharge petition is reckless in the way that it is drafted and presented. It does not adequately include those protections.
I said dispatch and I meant discharge petition, so I'll just clear that one up. Massey responded to all of this saying, we specifically made sure in our legislation that we were protecting the victims. You're not going to see child pornography or anything incriminating. We're going to redact their names. What do you make of all of this infighting, and can Republicans sweep this under the rug?
Look, Donald Trump usually luxuriates when he's inciting backlash and anger because that backlash and anger is coming from the Democrats. This is a completely separate issue because all of the anger was originally resonating within his MAGA base, not just the Republican Party, his MAGA base. Democrats were at first a little hesitant about wading into this. But of course, this will not go away. Everything comes back to just release the files, right? They want to talk about changing the Redskins' names. They want to talk about arresting President Obama. They want to talk about trade deals. Everything will come back to releasing the files until they do exactly that, because it speaks to something much larger, which is the truth of their word and their promises. And this thing's not going away anytime soon.
And there's also the question of whether these files, if they are released, will even satiate those people who are now calling for their release. Charlie, how much division is all of this sowing within the GOP right now? And is there a real concern that this could have a major impact in the midterms?
I don't know that I can speak too much about the electoral impact of this, but I what I can say is one of the reasons why this isn't going away is that there aren't a lot of scandals and things that really stick to Donald Trump in this way, right? And that's partly because he behaves in such a way, acts with this kind of shamelessness, which is really like a superpower of his, and nothing sticks to this. what you're seeing over the past month is he is getting very upset with this, but he's also behaving in this way where he's really not able to control the situation. He's not doing a good job messaging on this. He's saying things like today, like I didn't have the pleasure of going to Epstein's Island, sort of this weird, odd behavior. And that is a signal to both the media, to people in his base, to his defenders and his critics that something has kind of shaken things up here, that there's room for people to, continue to drive a wedge. And there are opportunists who are trying to do that. There are defenders. And I think what it is right now is it's just chaos. And that's in part because Trump is behaving in a way that he doesn't normally behave. He seems a little bit, erratic with this, a little bit taken aback by the spectacle of the whole thing.